It's a lovely day out.
That's so stupid. Welcome, guys. This is number 24.
Hello.
Number 24, we're going to be talking about blades.
Blades.
Yeah, we're going to talk about everything. We're just going to give you the typical drill where we show you
Everything about blades you can imagine.
a little bit of history about the blades. We're going to talk about different kinds of blades.
How to balance blades.
Yep. We're going to talk about what makes the blades fly, how they fly, you know, what to look for, weights, CGs, all that kind of stuff. And then we're going to wrap it up by flying a little bit and tell you some tips on what to look for on a blade.
It'll be good. I'm looking forward to this because blades have been around forever and they're kind of important, you know. Yep. And let's see, what else is going on in SmackTalk world?
We have a new series coming up.
Do we now?
Yeah, we do. We have actually a nice series coming up.
And what is that series going to entail?
It's going to be a surprise.
It's going to be a surprise?
Yeah. You guys are going to like it. This is actually great for the haters.
Oh, it's good for haters, yeah.
Yeah. Every single hater out there that says, oh, he flies that because he gets paid to fly it.
Yeah.
They're going to be proved wrong.
Yeah, the people who give us crap because they're like, oh, they get paid and they're sponsored pilots.
They're going to be proved wrong.
Yeah, we're going to prove them all wrong. It'll be good.
Yeah.
And it'll be slightly controversial. Yeah. Always controversial.
It's always is.
Oh, it'll be good.
Cool.
And I'm excited.
All right, enough of that. Let's roll it. Number 24.
Let's do it.
All right, we're going to talk about blades.
Yay.
Let's start with, let's see what we have here next. We're going to talk about align blades.
Let's talk about align blades.
The align blades have been around for a little while. As you guys know, align became really popular around 2006 or so with the introduction of their first T-Rex 600 electric. And soon thereafter, they started making blades. Prior to that, they were making smaller blades, like 325s for small 450s and such. But then they started making the bigger blades. And back during the flat bar days, I would say anywhere between 2007 and 2009 or whatever, the Align 690D, D as in David blades, were actually pretty good for flat bar helicopters. Now they have the 3G version of the blades, which are supposed to be a little bit more stable. They're made for flobberless applications and stuff like that. I guess it's a pretty standard blade. It's pretty average. I don't think there's anything absolutely great about them that stands out.
No.
But they're not bad blades.
No, they do everything well.
Yeah, they do everything well. They're a good middle-of-the-road blade.
Yeah, they're good. Exactly.
Next up is Edge. These are the latest blades from Edge, Edge SC. Edge was the first blade manufacturer to come out with flybbarless blades.
Yep.
I think they use that still to this day as one of their advertising things, although it's really irrelevant at this point because every single blade manufacturer is making blades that are suitable for flybbarless helicopters.
Yep.
So give Edge props in the sense that they started this out, but nowadays everybody's making flybbarless blades. Yep. Pretty solid blade too. I mean, I guess you could say it's similar to the Aligns in the sense that they're pretty good, well-rounded blade. They do everything kind of well. They don't stand out at anything in particular, but they're a good blade.
Exactly.
And then
next we got V-Blades. This was my V-Blades was my first little sponsor. I was the rep for Vic back in 2005. Anyway, V-Blades.
Vic is Vic Campbell.
Vic Campbell is the manufacturer of V-Blades here in the USA, in Missouri. And he's been making blades since maybe the 90s.
The 90s.
He's been making blades for a while.
Yeah.
And if you guys have only been in the hobby for a few years, V-Blades were actually like the biggest blade there ever was back in
Back in
2006,
the 2000s. Yeah, the 2000s.
In the 2000s. If you look at XFC, everybody winning it.
Can you believe that even people like Curtis Youngblood himself was sponsored by V-Blades?
Yeah, him, Alan Zabel, like all the top guys.
All the top guys flew V-Blades.
Anyway, so Vic had amazing blades. They're all handmade. They're wood core, so they're very, very, very stiff. When the SmackDown stuff started happening, they're very stiff. You could dig into you could stop this high off the ground because the V-blades just dug in so hard. Cost got expensive, so he tried to take it to Malaysia a few years ago, and that did not work out very well at all. So since he's stopped production, but he's created a new blade, which you can see here.
Right here. Yeah.
It's a flat barless blade, and Bert and I have actually flown them, and it's just like the old V-blades where they bite in real hard. But these are nice. They track well. Experience RC is their distributor. Dealer here. I don't know how that's working.
Yeah.
But anyway, Vic's back making blades.
It's a solid blade.
Good.
And we're going to talk about the cores and stuff like that later on and tell you the differences about that. But that's it for V-Blades.
V-Blades.
And then SAB, these guys have been doing this for almost 20 years now. The original SAB blade right up here looked pretty plain. It just had a stripe of black carbon going on in the gel coat, and that was it. These are kind of the latest that they have. SAB is another well-rounded blade. It depends on the type of SAB blade you choose. There's a lot of different types. Overall, they're, again, pretty, I guess you could say, nothing really extremely incredible about a certain feature, but very well-rounded blade. They fly very, very well.
Yes, sir.
And then Rotor.
Yeah, next we got Rotor. These are also made by a company in China called Funky.
Yeah.
And Funky actually makes a lot of these blades we showed here. They make edge blades.
Let's backtrack here.
Let's backtrack for a second. Funky makes a lot of them in China.
Align is made by Align.
Yep.
These are made by Funky.
Made by Vic. No.
Okay, so far we only have two.
We have two.
But you'll see
two.
There's more.
There's more. So Rotor also made by Funky. They're distributed by Century here in the U.S. I don't know how that works overseas. But they're a very nice blade. Scott Gray flies these. He's always flown these. And he's got his own version.
His own design or his
yeah,
own
he's got his own design. These always tracked really well. And I don't know, they're good blades. They make
pretty good night blades.
Yeah, the night blades are wicked. They do stuff that changes colors and like 250. I boomstruck a set of Scott Gray's night blades. He won. Sorry. All right, next.
Next up, we have the rail blades.
These are also made by Funky over in China. These are Matt Botos's. Yeah, Matt Botos created these blades with Synergy. And he's doing really well with the rail blades. I like it. He's got a different sort of tip shape on there that seems to work really well. He wanted to make them, he was telling us in a quick tips, our most recent quick tips, he wanted them to track like your own rails. And they do. They track very, very well. I wouldn't say it's a soft blade, but it's kind of one of those blades that does everything well.
One of those things we're going to talk about is how you have to give something up to get something else.
Exactly.
You can't get the best of everything with a blade.
Yep.
You either have a blade that tracks really well and then it suffers in, say, quickness, for example, or you can have a blade that stops really, really hard, but then it suffers in current draw.
Exactly.
I mean, you never get the best of everything. You have to always sacrifice one thing for another. We'll talk about that. But great blades for big flying, fast, huge flying. If you have a Goblin, these blades will probably do great if you want to do 130 miles an hour. So
they do.
That's it for rail. And Matt Botos, obviously a very smart guy, a good friend of ours. Good luck to him with that. Radix was designed and developed by Curtis Youngblood. These blades are also made at Funky. And you're probably asking, well, how is Funky making all these blades? Well, it's simple. Funky is it's probably the largest manufacturer of blades in the whole world.
Yep.
They're outside of Hong Kong. And basically they take the details as far as weights and NACA profiles and CGs and gel coat design that you want.
Yep.
And for a reasonable amount of money, I'm sure
you could have your own blade too.
1,000 blades, you can have your own blades made by Funky.
Yeah.
And a lot of the premium or most well-known blade manufacturers are using Funky as their manufacturing plant. So Radix was started by Curtis Youngblood. I think I might be wrong, around 2005 or 6, somewhere in there.
Yep.
somewhere in that time frame. The original Radix were around for a long time, up until about last year or something like that. Pretty solid blade. Curtis is a big pilot that likes to fly big and fast. So he made his blades also to track very, very well. Exactly. They were pretty decent for smack, but not so much of a smack blade as much as a big flying, precision flying blade.
Exactly. But now he's got the V2s.
He's got the V2s. These came out at the end of last year sometime. And these are good for flybar and flybarless helicopters. And great blade. Excellent blade. So, and to wrap things up,
we have Maverick blades.
I'm sorry. There we go. We have Maverick blades. Maverick blades are distributed by Heli Wholesaler in the United States. It's not a lie to say that these blades back in the day were really bad. They were horrible.
Oh.
Yeah, we're talking
2000s,
two versions ago. You know, if you would have asked me to fly a Maverick blade back in 2007 or 8, I would have said no way. There's no way. They used to load the motor. They made all kinds of weird noises. They went out of track. They fluttered. They didn't track. So Bobby and I were approached by these guys, and we were asked if we could help make the blades better. I started working with the flybar version of the blades. I was still flying flybars. We're talking 2009. And Bobby and I pretty much came out with the flybar version of the blade, which actually rocks.
G5 awesome. Wide chord, I think they called it.
Flybar version. So if you have a flybar helicopter, the blade is awesome. The blade tracked very, very well. It had really hard stopping power. It was just awesome.
They were sweet.
Then I left the company. Bobby was left with the burden of
I was left with making it flybarless.
Flybarless blade, and
I did as much as I could.
But how is it? Is it there?
It's close. On the nitros, I tested it on a 700 nitro. On the nitros, it seemed to rock. It really seemed to rock. As soon as you get a bigger, heavier electric machine, it started. We'll show you later. In terms of quickness and aggressiveness and autoing, awesome. But in terms of the big flying, it gets a little bit touchy.
And then again, that's like I just said.
It's a trade-off.
It's a trade-off.
So we did with this one. We did what we could with the airfoil. So certain airfoils, certain chord shapes, and everything have. You can only do so much. So this is as much as we could do. But in terms of a smack blade and all that stuff, it's great.
It's great.
It's great. But this one's made by Go Composite.
Go Composite
in Thailand. Thailand. So all sorts of manufacturers everywhere.
So that wraps it up for introduction to the different types of blades. I know there's more blades out there. There's a spin blade in Europe that is kind of
torsion blades.
There's torsion blades. There's
a lot.
These
are the main ones that we see at Fun Flies and stuff.
These are the ones we see all the time. So that was worth showing. So let's move on. We're going to talk about the technical aspects of a blade next.
Okay, before we get too technical about blades, it's prudent for us to give you guys a bit of a history lesson like we always try to do about blades. So as far as we know, when the first helicopters came out, guys were more, they're much more modelers where they had to make everything. And they made their own blades. Either they'd come as like a kit where you can kind of assemble them yourself. But for the most part, the first blades that there were wooden blades. We call them woodies. Not that kind of woody, but yeah, they're made of wood. So they've got, the first ones, I'm sure they just had a wooden root. But for the most part, the woodies have just a plastic root and then a brass spacer for the bolt hole. And then the whole blade itself is made of balsa wood. Balsa wood, a little bit of lead at the end to give it some weight. And then they would just wrap it in like a monocoat or a sort of a plastic coating. Now, all the blades that you see today are symmetrical, meaning if you look at the profile of the blade, it's like this. It's totally symmetrical through the center. That way, when you go upside down and inverted, it flies the same upside down as it does upright. Well, the blades back then, I'm pretty sure some of the first blades were asymmetrical or non-symmetrical, where the bottoms were flat. This created more lift, but as soon as you go upside down, it doesn't really give you any lift. So all the blades now that everybody uses for every application pretty much are symmetrical, but sometimes you'll see guys, if they're doing heavy lifting projects or something, they'll use a non-symmetrical blade. It'll just give you a little bit more lift. So the symmetrical blades came into being, and I don't know exactly when, easily in the 90s, sometimes maybe late 80s, guys started using fiberglass blades, which were a little bit stronger than the wooden blades, but they still kind of warped and they weren't as strong as we'd like them. So then they got into carbon fiber blades. And for the most part, everybody is using carbon fiber blades now with a foam core. That means the inside is hollow, it's kind of like a shell, and then they fill the inside with a foam. Foam's nice because it's very light and it's very strong. Now, the only person to ever do a wood core blade is V-Blades. This is successfully. V-Blades, as we mentioned before, here in the USA. Vic used a basswood and a balsa wood in combination, as well as lead and then the outside carbon fiber, to make the blade very, very stiff, very torsionally strong, and it was cool. They made like a loud farting sound. They could bite in the ground real hard. Now, Align tried to do a wood core blade, but they didn't work out as well, so they kind of scrapped the project. So V-Blades is the only one to this day who's still using a wood core blade. So that's our evolution here of blades. Now we're going to get into some more in-depth technical talk.
All right, guys, we're going to talk a little bit about blades. What to look for in a blade. What makes a blade fly the way they fly? What are the things that you need to think about when buying a blade? And to give you a little bit of a technical explanation on how blades work. We're not going to go overkill, so we're not going to be really in-depth technical, but I'm going to give you actually a few tips that will actually help you learn more about blade, which in the end will help you make a better decision when purchasing blades. We're just going to use an SAB. This is a small blade. It makes it easier just to show. I think this is a 525. 525 or 520. So anyway, the first thing, there's three things that make a blade and the way a blade flies. The first thing is the airfoil. The second thing is the overall weight of the blade. And the third thing is the how the weight is distributed in the blade, the CG. So of course there's other things as well. How flexible the blade is, it's a consideration. We're going to talk about that later. But those are the three most important things. Again, number one, the profile, the airfoil. It's called the profile. Number two, the overall weight. Number three, the CG. So profile, that's a simple one. Most blade manufacturers use what we call standard NACA profiles. There's about 2 or 3 that are most commonly used. We're not going to go into detail about that. It really makes no difference for you to guys exactly know what the difference in the airfoil is, as long as practically every single blade that's out there for sale today uses a NACA profile that is suitable for the blade for flight. So that's really not as important, even though it does affect the way they fly. There's really not a whole lot to know or to learn about the differences in the profiles. The most important part is the next two things, the overall weight and the CGs. For weight, it really depends on the size blade you want, but generally the heavier the blade, the more stable the blade will be. There's a few exceptions, and I'm going to explain those exceptions. But again, generally, the heavier the blade, the more stable it'll be. So say, for example, for a 690 to 710 size blade, around 700 millimeter blades, you know, for flybarless applications, you want more weight than for flybar applications. For FAI type flying, you definitely want more weight than for flybarless or for flybar. So the more weight you have, the more stable, once again, the blade will be. So if you're flying a 700 millimeter blade, you want something in the range of about 170 grams for a flybar helicopter, about 180 to 190, even 200 for flybarless, and about 220 or so for FAI. On the 600 category, totally different story. You want something in the 120s for flybar, 130s to 140s for flybarless. FAI, hard to tell because there aren't too many people flying FAI on 600 millimeter blades or 600 class helicopters. But anyway, going back to the weights. The overall weight is important, but how the weight is distributed is even more important. There's two types of CG. There is the span-wise CG, which is how the weight is distributed from the root of the blade to the tip of the blade. So this CG, and then there's a chord-wise CG, which is how the weight is distributed alongside the blade from the leading edge to the trailing edge. So this CG. So Generally, on a flybar-less blade, you want a little bit more tip weight than root weight. In other words, if you split the blade in half, the blade should want to go exactly that way. See how tip heavy these things are? In order for this blades to balance on my finger, quite a bit past the center of the blade. What that does is, the heavier the tip is, span YCG becomes more stable, and then the blade overall blade stability improves. It slows down the response on the cyclic, but at the same time it improves stability, it improves tracking. If you had a flybar helicopter, you would actually want that to be opposite. You would want to have a little bit more root weight for the most part, because on a flybar helicopter, you want to actually increase your cyclic speed. So you want to shift the weight from the tip a little bit more towards the root. And also, the heavier the tip is, the more your helicopter will load. In other words, you're going to need more power to spool up the blades and keep the blade spinning. The more root weight you have, the quicker the helicopter will respond to power changes, because there's less mass to spin at the end, there's less weight. So that is an important consideration, the span YCG. The important thing here is, if you're flying flybarless, make sure your blade span YCG is at least past the center point. You want more tip weight than root weight. The next consideration is actually the hardest one to figure out. It's the span YCG. Court YCG, I apologize. If it's too leading edge heavy, meaning the court YCG is too close to the leading edge, it becomes very, very stable, almost even hard to make changes in flight. And it can develop some bad characteristics as well, because if you think about it, the blade it's very hard to change the pitch on the blade if you have a lot of weight on the root. If it's too trailing edge heavy, then it's very unstable, because it wants to constantly change pitch by itself. So you have to find a sweet spot for the court YCG. Most blade manufacturers, all the blades we showed you a little bit ago, they all have pretty close down to perfect core YCGs. They all fly very well, but that is an important consideration as well. Again, if it's too stable, say you're doing a hurricane, for example, like for a hurricane, and you go bail out of the hurricane, the helicopter might want to tuck or do something weird if it's way too stable, because it has a hard time responding to the pitch changes, and once it reacts, it might overreact. If it's too trailing edge heavy, then you're running into a similar situation where you actually might not even have a good tracking throughout the hurricane itself. So that's an important thing. It needs to be right where it needs to be. Those two together work in conjunction to make the blade what the blade is. In other words, you know, you can have a blade that is like very unstable on the core YCG with a little bit more trailing edge weight. You can counteract that by adding more weight to the tip, but you're not improving things, you're making them worse. You're actually masking one core problem by modifying another. The right blade, the good blade, would have a perfect combination of both good court wise and good span YCG. The court wise is always critical, but the span wise, again, does a lot of things. Like I said before, it increases or decreases your cyclic speed, it increases or decreases your overall stability, and it can actually make the blade auto better or worse. If you have more tip weight, the blade's going to auto better, because it's going to have more weight at the tip, so there's more mass. So it's going to take a little while longer to decelerate as you're doing your auto. You're going to have more blade speed at the end. But on the other hand, if you're doing an aerobatic auto where you're slowing the blades down, you want them to spool back up, it might take a little longer to spool back up. So there's always a trade-off with these things, always. But it's just at least important that you guys know the basic differences in what makes up a blade. Finally, gel coat design. That's just a personal preference thing. You know, some blades are prettier than others. Some blades have some cooler designs than others. Don't even think about that. You know, it's important that you see the disc in flight if that is a consideration, but don't go by looks. Go by how the blade flies, how the blade performs. Go by you know, the overall weight, the overall span wise and court YCG. Just don't think about the colors. That's really very insignificant. Finally, this is not as important, but it's certainly a consideration, how flexible the blade is. And again, this all works in conjunction with everything else. If the blade is too flexible, for the most part, most blades nowadays are pretty stiff. They don't flex. You want to look at how much they flex this way, span-wise, and how much they flex this way, cord-wise. You want a blade that dampens a little bit this way, but that is kind of stiff this way. You want very little torsional flex, cord-wise flex. You want a little bit of span-wise flex. You know, wooden blades, not wooden blades, but wood core blades, like Bobby was talking about earlier. For example, V blades have very little, if practically nothing, in terms of torsional flex. So what that does is when you apply a lot of pitch, because there's less flex here, the blade actually digs in deeper and you're actually pulling more pitch. A blade that flexes might be taking away a couple of degrees every time you punch, like say full collective, because that flex is going in the direction of the pitch input. So instead of having 14 when you punch it, that initial punch, you might only be getting 12 or whatever. But again, if it's a stiff blade, you're getting every bit of that collective input or cyclic input. So flex is another consideration. Just make sure the blades are somewhat stiff. You really don't want a blade that's too flimsy. So, but I think that wraps it up for kind of sort of giving you a technical explanation of what to look for in a blade.
So now we're going to discuss how to balance blades. So I think the first thing that needs to be said is if you're buying any good blade, Rotor Tech, SAB, V-blades, any blade now that is either made by Funky or, you know, the top makers of blades, any good blade that you buy, Align blades, they should be balanced. So if you buy a set of these blades that are, they should be balanced and the same weight. If these things are any more than like 0.3 of a gram, so maybe like a half a gram at most, out of weight, or if the CG does not balance, then send your blades back and get a new set, because they should be balanced from the factory. But for those of you guys maybe flying cheaper fiberglass blades or wooden blades or something, if you're on a budget, we're going to show you just a concept of how to balance blades, because this is what they do at the factory. So first I just want to show you the the redneck sort of method. So what you would want to do is you'd want to get a really sharp sort of corner, something like this. And all you're basically going to do is just get your blade to kind of balance sort of on the edge, just a sharp edge like that. And then you'll take your Sharpie, wherever that might be, and you'll take your Sharpie and you'll just mark it. So that'll check what we call the span-wise CG, as Bert described this way. Now, to check your chord-wise CG to see where it's going to balance this way, the easiest way to do it is just to go to the wall or something and to just tack a small hole in the wall. Hang the blade on there, wait for it to settle back and forth, and then you can just mark where the tip is. And that'll make sure that it's not an exact way to check the CG, but it'll make sure that they're both the same. And that's really all that you care about, because you're not designing a blade, you just want to make sure it doesn't flutter. So usually what I do with blades is first I'll get a scale. There's small digital scales, like postal scales. You can go to Walmart or something. They're like 20 bucks for a little scale. And check it. Just make sure they're the same weight, roughly. Then what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how, for instance, when V-Blades made their blades in the USA, they use this guy. This is a blade balancing tool. It's called a Rotor Pro. Miniature Aircraft sells them here in the US. I'm not sure about overseas. I think they're pretty pricey. I think they're a little bit under 100 bucks, but they're well worth it if you really want to get precise. Now the Rotor Pro comes with a stick that allows you to get the blades lined up perfectly, but we don't have that here, so I'm just going to show you the jits of how everything works. So we'll take this SAB blade again, and what we do first is we want to do the span-wise first. So let's say I've weighed it and the blades weigh the same. Okay, wonderful. So I adjust this little metal slider here to get my bubble level perfectly centered right here. Then all I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my pivot point. If you can see from the camera, top down, this is my pivot point right here. So that's where I'm going to mark stuff. As you can see, we've already marked this one. It's exactly where your pivot point is. So we're going to take it here, and we're just going to find a sweet middle spot of where I can let go of the blade and the bubble will just stay perfectly balanced. So let's see. And it's very delicate. Here we're close. So you can see I'm pretty darn close right here. So then I'll mark it right where that mark is, just roughly right there. So then what I can do is I can do a few different things. In order to check it, if we had the other blade, I could just measure. So for instance, this one's 24 and a half. Usually we measure them from the bolt hole, but just for the sake of making sure the blades are the same, this one's 24 and a half 24 and a half centimeters away from the trailing edge of the blade. So I'd get my other blade, find the CG, and then I would just check it and make sure that the span-wise CGs are the same for the blades. Then we'll check what we call the chord-wise. So once again, I'll just make sure that this is totally level. And this isn't the exact perfect way to do it, but this is how we use the coals to just get them close. You can add a bit of a spacer in between here to make sure that the blade stays perfectly perpendicular with the Coal Pro. And then you can just slide it forward and we'll get the CG as close as we can. Here we're off by a little bit, but you can see if we draw a straight line here along the pivot point when the bubble level centered, so let's just say it'll probably end up being right around here. And for the most part with flat barless blades, our CG is very, very, very close along to the bolt hole, maybe a little bit forward. So now what we've done is we found that's our CG spot right there. When I add, or sorry, this is our line right there. So our CG is right here for this blade. And as Bert discussed, it's a little bit further out from center, which is perfect. That means these blades are good to go. So now let's say you want to mix and match blades, because you can do that. So let's say if I have two Rotor Tech blades, this one I crashed and have it from a year ago, and this one I just crashed and mix and match. So what you're going to do is, it's kind of tough because you're going to change the weights of everything, but for the most part this is what you do. You're going to have your master blade, so we'll call this the master blade. Let's say the other blade, the CG, let's just say I need to add more weight to it. All I'm going to do is I'm going to take some sort of a heavy tape and I'm going to wrap it around just anywhere out here in the blade just to add some weight. Then what I'll do is I'll check my CGs again. For the most part, you're not going to ever change your chord-wise CG. You just want to change your span. So you'll take the blade that has the innermost span and you'll add tape to it to bring it out to the other one. Then you're going to make sure your blades match and you're going to be good to go. Now the only thing that might be different is the overall weight in the blade. And then what you do is you take your master blade exactly where your CG point is and you put enough tape on that one to make sure that you don't change the CG, but that you change the overall weight, and both blades will weigh the same at the end of it. It's kind of a painstaking procedure, but for instance, the guys running Woodies or cheaper blades, this is really, really important. Now to show you an efficient way this is how V-Blades did it. So all we just talked about is, you can see here, if you guys have ever wondered, on the Maverick blades and on the V-Blades, there's a little hole here. It's like a plug, it's like a black plug, it's filled in. This is what they did. They took the coal balancer, and this is exactly where their CG is. So they got the other CG lined up perfectly on the other blades, and what they do is they drill and they fill this in with a heavy weight, like a lead fishing weight or something. They epoxy over it and then they smooth it out. That's all they did. So they just bounce these at the factory. Most of the funky blades don't have that hole because they just do completely matched sets from the factory. They make so many blades that they're bound to find sets that match each other. So that's how to balance blades, balancing blades 101. For the most part, you don't need to do it, but it's worthwhile checking out one of these things because it's really cool. If you feel like playing around one day and if you want to see where the CGs compare to different blades, I suggest you guys chuck some of these on a coal balancer because it's funny. It's cool to see how the blades balance and then how they fly in the air. Kind of has a lot to do with it. So that's balancing blades. Let's move on.
All right, guys, we can't really wrap this up by any stretch of the imagination until we talk about tail blades. Unfortunately, there isn't a hell of a lot to talk about, but there's a few important considerations to take in mind. Most tail blades, to be quite honest, fly kind of the same. I mean, you really can't say, well, those tail blades fly better, because they really don't. What you're looking for with tail blades is to make sure that they're properly balanced, that they're durable, good quality. You don't want blades to separate or split at the trailing edge and stuff like that. Two main types of tail blades: carbon fiber, plastic. the difference is quite obvious. There's nothing wrong with the plastic ones, but you're really not going to get true full 3D performance, good tail authority out of plastic tail blades. KBDD makes plastic tail blades. They're colorful, they're nice looking, they're great for beginners, they're great for maybe aerobatic flying and stuff like that. You know, it's great because you can hit the tail on the ground, say during an auto, you're not going to hurt the blades. They're very resilient to like scratches and, you know, hitting the pavement or whatever. But other than that, when it comes to hardcore 3D and good tail authority, especially doing pirouetting maneuvers and stuff like that, and fast traveling pirouetting maneuvers, you're not going to get the same holding power out of plastic tail blades because they're going to flex. So you definitely want a carbon fiber tail blade. SAB makes them, Align makes them, Edge makes them, Curtis Youngblood, Radix makes them, Rail makes them. I mean, there's all kinds of brands, there's all kinds of different types. They all really fly the same. Two things you got to keep in mind. Number one, the length. For most 700 size or class helicopters, you want a tail blade that's about 105 millimeters. Some helicopters, for example, like the TRX 700N, are known to have a little bit too low of a tail gear ratio. So Bobby and I personally recommend that you run 115 millimeter tail blades instead of 105s. You know, 110s might work. It depends on the manufacturer. I think some of them make 110s, some of them make 115s. But slightly longer than the standard 105. For a 600 class machine, you want to run the typical 95 millimeter tail blades. Some helicopters like the Logo 600, again, the tail is not as good as it could be. You can run slightly longer tail blades, so you can put 105s on your Logo 600. But bottom line is, pick the right size. And then make sure that it's a quality blade. For the most part, they will be balanced correctly. These are SABs right here. These are green because they're made to match the SAB Goblin. These are pretty good, actually pretty good tail blades. Generally, when you get these, you just put them on your helicopter and you go fly, and you really don't need to worry about it. For the most part, you know, some people are really picky when it comes to their setups, and they want to balance them. That this is something you can, of course, do. I personally never do. What I do is I go fly. If I notice a problem or a tail vibration, then I'll go back and I'll check the balance, because sometimes they can be out of balance. The easiest way to check the balance on the tail blade is to get a prop balancer. You know, you go to a hobby shop, and you know those balancers they sell to balance the actual propellers for an airplane. You buy one of those, and then what you do is basically you remove the tail assembly, not the whole assembly, but you remove the tail output shaft and the hub, and then you mount this onto your blade balancer. You tighten the blades, you make sure they're perfectly straight, and then basically you want to rotate the tail, and you want to make sure that it's not trying to sort of keep going in one direction, where you'll find a spot that is heavier than the other. So if this blade, for example, it's out of balance with respect to this blade, and you had it on a blade balancer, on a prop balancer, you would see this kind of dropping down. So you start adding weight to the opposite blade until the goal is to make sure that in any position you have the disc or the whole tail rotor, that it doesn't want to continue, it doesn't want to fall in one direction or another. It just wants to kind of get locked in that position, and that guarantees that your tail blades are balanced. And of course, at the same time, you're making sure your whole tail system is balanced. But other than that, that's really it. There's nothing else really to talk about tail blades. Just make sure you go with the quality, well-known brand, and I'm sure you'll be happy with them. And we're now at the field.
Yes, we are.
Torches Field.
Lovely.
On a hot day in Florida.
It's beautiful. It's not hot.
And what we're going to do next is we're going to fly our helicopters, and we're going to basically show you what Bobby and I look for when we're either testing blades or when we're prototyping blades, or even when we are trying to make a decision on what blade to fly. Basically just a few things that we look for.
I'd say there's 5 characteristics.
5 main things.
5 main things. So here we go. So we're both going to take a flight. I'm going to fly my Galway X7. Bert's going to fly his SAB Goblin. And Bert's going to be taking a look at 2 main things. He's going to be looking at kind of the smackdown sort of style.
The stop power.
Stopping power.
Stopping power.
And your agility, right off center.
right off center.
Right off
agility.
center to see the agility, to see how everything responds.
Yeah.
I'm going to look at 3 other things. I'm going to be looking at tracking. So we're going to go big and take a look at how stable it is. We're going to be looking
how much they load overall.
How much the blades load, and lastly we're going to look at autoing. And autoing is kind of broken into 2 subcategories: the hang time and the ability to spool it back up after you slow them down.
Exactly.
So that's
we talked about that before. So for practical purposes, we're not going to use every single set of blades that we showed you before. We're just going to fly the blades we normally fly, and basically kind of give you an idea as to, again, what to look for when you're trying different types of blades.
Exactly. Should be cool. Let's go fly.
Let's go fly.
Yay! Okay, so we're here at the field. I've got my Gaui X7 here with my cool racing canopy, and Bert and I are just going to show you what we look for in blades. So I've been running the Rail 696s one here, and I like them. And I'm going to show you some things we look for in blades. So the first thing we're going to look for me, we're going to do tracking. So I'm going to go big. Now for flybarless, we look for straight line tracking. So I'm going to come here, just forward flight, and I'm just going to go hands off. This is hands off completely right here. And that's in a straight line, and it tracks nice and straight for me. I pull in a big loop, half turn, it's not getting twitchy. That's full pitch right there, and you can see my hands are off the stick and it's going straight. And that's what we want to see. We don't want to see it go pitchy or whatever. Now a blade that would get pitchy, I'll show you here, a blade that would go pitchy would porpoise like that, kind of like that, and we don't want that. Porpoising is very, very bad. Now the next thing we look for in tracking is when you go big and you go to center stick, and then you do like kind of like enter like a hurricane, for instance, like a quarter roll into hurricane, so like a quarter roll and then into a hurricane like that. Some blades will want to tuck on you. So when you go and tuck, it'll kind of wig out like that. We don't want that. So I'm going to enter it real fast. So I'm going to go full speed. I'm going to go full speed, 0, center, roll into a hurricane, and it's just a nice turn. So kind of like a forward snake. Kind of like that sort of thing, like a big maneuver like this. It's nice. It's not wanting to do anything weird on me. It's not wanting to tuck. That's the biggest thing. So tracking is what we're going to look for first. Next thing we're going to look at is loading. The best way to kind of show you loading is kind of like a big loop or something. So we'll do like a big loop with like flips or something. And we want to hear how bad the motor's loading. And kind of full stick sort of stuff. You know, full stick. It's kind of hard. Loading is kind of hard to tell in the air. The best way to describe loading and the best way to see loading definitively, like without any question, is to hook up like a data logger like an Eagle Tree. You can see how many amps you're drawing in real time. You can see how many watts you're pulling out of your setup at a given pitch. So for instance, you could just do like a straight 10-degree climb and compare it between blades and stuff. Another way you can do it is flight time. So let's say I'll do 5-10 flights with these rail blades, then I'll do 5-10 flights with the V blades, and we'll just see how my flight times compare how many milliamps I put back into it. So that's for efficient, I guess not efficiency, but kind of loading and stuff. As Bert mentioned earlier, a blade that has less twist, for instance, will have more stopping power, but will load the motor and will load the whole batteries and the helicopter less. So that's for loading. And lastly, we do autoing. So I'm going to look at 2 things. I'm going to do 2 things in this auto. Number 1, I'm going to slow the blades down, and I'm going to see how well they come back. Then I'm going to look at hang time at the end. So here I'm in my auto, and I'm going to do hang time. So I'm going to slow it down to almost a blade stop. Okay, cool. Now I'm going to bail out and see how well the speed comes up. So let's see. Speed came up pretty good. Now I'm going to see my hang time at the bottom. Let's see. I'd say that was fair. That was about fair. I'd say that, for instance, the Radix, I think I know my Maverick blades that I used to fly, they spool up just like that after you slow the head down because the CG seems to be in more. They're a little bit more twitchy in forward flight. These are a little bit more stable in forward flight. And then the hang time has to do with just the overall weight and where your span-wise CG is at the end. So for instance, these blades I'd say kind of rated in the middle in terms of auto performance, but they're very stable in tracking, they're very stable when you auto and whatnot. So those are the 3 things I looked at. Now let's move on to Bert. He's going to talk about agility and stopping power.
All right, now that Bobby explained to you these 3 important things to look for, I'm going to explain 2 more. We're going to talk first about agility, and second, we're going to talk about stopping power. With regards to agility, before I get in the air, I want to tell you something very quickly. We're flying a flybbarless model, and once you tweak your flybbarless system, if you peg the stick, say elevator or aileron at full deflection, your helicopter is going to rotate at a certain speed, and that speed is determined by the flybbarless control system. For example, on the V-bar, like I have here, if you guys are familiar with the V-bar, I have my agility set at 110. So once I peg the stick, say full roll, say I'm doing a stationary roll, full right aileron, once I peg the stick and I hold it there, the helicopter is eventually going to rotate at a certain rotational speed, or so many degrees per second or whatever. But here's where the difference comes in when it comes to blades. The amount of time it takes for that initial snap, that initial reaction from the helicopter when you give a sudden quick input on the stick is determined by how agile the blades are. And like we talked before, if the span YCG is closer to the root, that blade is going to be quicker. If it's closer to the tip, the blade is going to be slower. The key here is to find a blade that has the right amount, the right distance on the span YCG so that it's quick enough, but yet it's not unstable. So here we're going to try that first. So, and to check the agility, just do something really basic. I mean, backwards 4-point flips. That's the best way to do it, or forwards, or aileron, 4-point ailerons. So simply like put the helicopter nose in or sideways, whatever, and just bang the stick like this to do a 4-point flip. And see, this reaction here is what is determined by the blade and how quick the blade responds. Once you hold this stick like this, doesn't matter if the blade is reactive or non-reactive, because at this point the flybbarless system had a chance to catch up, and eventually the helicopter will rotate relatively at the same speed regardless of the blade. Doesn't matter if the blade is 20 grams lighter, 20 grams heavier, heavier at the tip, heavier at the root. Once you hold that stick and you leave it there, eventually the flybbarless system is going to do the work. The servos are going to be at the deflection they need to be in, and you're going to get the fast rotational speed. But again, finally, when you do this, you just bang the stick, that initial reaction right here. That is determined by the blade. Some blades are slower than others. And again, the key here is to find a blade that has the agility that you want without sacrificing the stability and the tracking like Bobby showed you. Next thing we're going to talk about is stopping power. All blades stop really well, like most of them do. But to check the stopping power, you basically just do something really, really simple, like say a rainbow. And then you bang the stick, bang it. As you can see, like SABs are really good for stopping. They stop really good. So just simple stuff like that, where even a pogo, like that kind of shows you the stopping power of a blade.
They call it the pop.
Or the pop, or like sideways rainbows. As you can see, these blades like stop really well. These are, like we discussed before, these blades are actually pretty good in all areas. They don't particularly stand out at one particular feature, but they really, in my opinion, they shine in all aspects. I mean, they have really good stability, they have good tracking, they auto pretty well, they have really good stopping power. Other blades, are far better when it comes to, for example, stopping power, even more aggressive than these. But then they lack in some other areas, like they'll load the motor more, they'll cause more issues with current usage, or like Bobby was explaining, you might fly and then realize that you put a lot more milliamps into the pack. Other blades just simply won't track as well. So everything, like we explained before, is a trade-off. The more agile the blade is, the more unstable it'll be. The more stopping power it has, the more it'll load the motor, and the more, especially if you're flying nitro, the more the nitro motor will load. And generally on an electric, the more milliamps you'll put at the end of the flight. So again, everything's a trade-off. So just find that sweet blade that you like, that has a good combination of everything. Or if you're a hardcore smacker and you want the hard pop, you don't mind giving up on some of the other stuff, then go for a blade that does that. Hey guys, this is Bert. We're here at Huntsville, Alabama. This is the Huntsville Fun Fly, I guess, 2012.
I have my friend Matt Botos. For all of you guys who don't know who he is, you need to, I don't know, open a browser and look around. He's the main designer and owner of Synergy RC, and also the main designer and owner of Rail Blades. How's it going, Matt?
It's going great. How you doing, Bert?
Good. Yeah. This month we're doing an episode about blades, and basically what we did is we showed everybody like 9 different kinds of blades, like brands of blades. We went everything from obviously rails all the way down the line to everything, like Align blades, Radix, you name it. And you have your own blade business pretty much. And what would you recommend the user? You know, I guess the episode was focused mainly on showing people what to look for in a blade, like what are the different, differences that you can expect when flying a blade, how the CG affects a blade, just an overall picture of everything that a blade, all the characteristics that can make or break a blade. Yeah. So let's start off with rails, obviously. What inspired you to do rail, and what did you do with rail that you think it's different or better, or, what do you think rails have to offer that other blades don't?
Right. Well, one of the biggest challenges I felt with a rotor blade is that you either had a blade that tracked really well, or you had a blade that smacked really well. So I wanted to go right down the middle and see if I can get one that could do everything well. I also wanted it to be ultra efficient. I don't want them really noisy, even though you can make them crack and pop as much as you want. So yeah, I tried to get somewhere down the middle because I like to fly big and I like to fly in the box. I'm kind of stuck in between there. So and I felt that would kind of hit the market perfectly well as well.
And we noticed, like, when Bobby and I tested some blades, and we really didn't emphasize on any particular set, but when we kind of explained to people, that's basically what we told them is that you're usually it's a trade-off. You're usually gonna get something in exchange for something else. There's no possible way to get excellent performance on every single aspect, like on stopping power, smack performance, tracking. You usually sacrifice one, but so you basically try to go with something that is not extremely great at any of these, but does really well when you put them all together, like well-rounded, right?
Yeah. I think for the most part, they got to live up to their name. They're rail blades. Yep. You're flying, they got to track. So first and foremost, the blades got to track. They're good on cyclic. They're good on, they pretty much fit the entire envelope, but they really focus on good tracking, high-speed flight, and efficiency.
And what's up with the tip? I heard something, I'm going to let you explain it, but something about the tip that you did with the tip to improve something?
Yeah, it's a swept back tip, and my theory there was just a little bit less airfoil, just a little bit smaller tip or smaller airfoil on the tip, cutting it back and just trying to get the vortices coming off the blade a little bit less dramatic. I don't know how else to explain it, but it makes it quiet, makes it a quiet blade.
And Matt actually brought up a point that we didn't even talk about during our filming of the episode, which was noise, blade noise. And generally, a lot of people like the noise, but the noise is usually depends on how you're generating the noise. But for the most part, if you're just flying straight and level and you start rolling the helicopter and you hear a lot of noise, that usually means inefficiency. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
So if you're banging the sticks and popping it really hard on the deck and just using full collective and cyclic bursts and it makes noise, well, it's going to. But if you're just flying straight and level and you just say peg the aileron and you start rolling, it should be a clean sound. Is that correct? And rails are pretty good at that. Do you think the tip contributes to that?
I think it does. There's a lot of airfoil. I had a couple different airfoils when I first did this project, and one of them had this whistling aspect to it. One of them wasn't. It just didn't track right. And then finally, I got the last airfoil, and clean and smooth through all forward flight. And then when you really pop on it, it does make a sound, but nowhere near like some of the old style wooden blades. So yeah, I think that does affect it.
Sweet, and I'm just going to put you to the test. I'm going to ask you a question that you might not want to answer, but a lot of people will look forward to hearing this. Of course, you like rails. You design them. It's your baby. You did them the way you wanted them to fly, so of course they're your favorite blades. I'm not going to ask what your favorite blades are, duh. But if rails didn't exist, what would you look for in a blade? I don't want you to tell me a brand. This is what I want to fly. This is what I would fly. But what would you look for in a blade as an average pilot, not even as Matt Botos? What would you recommend the viewer, the guys out there listening or watching, to what do you recommend them to look for when getting a blade? Is there anything that you can think of? I mean, obviously that's dependent on their preference, flying style, and all this kind of stuff. But I don't know. Is there anything that pops to mind? Anything?
Well, I would say you're going to want a blade that provides, let's face it, not every pilot is a pro pilot. So most of the guys are intermediate, novice, and you want a blade that tracks really well. You want a blade that's stable. You want a blade that's going to inspire confidence in your flying. You don't want something that's real twitchy and just out of control. So, something that you can feel comfortable flying. And then also the efficiency aspect. You don't want something that's constantly loading and, that's going to be rough on collective management. So as you're learning, it's something that's going to be just a little bit easier to fly and, confidence inspiring. You don't want to feel like you're constantly skating on ice when you're flying a blade.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it, dude. Thank you.
That's it. Number 24.
That was it. Wrapped it up.
I hope you guys enjoy this. I think it was kind of cool to show all the blades. It was actually a refresher course for me, too.
There's a bunch of them out there.
Yeah.
I forgot how many there are.
Yeah. And there's so many of them that we didn't cover, but it's kind of funny how things work with blades. A blade will be like totally unknown.
Yep.
Nobody knows what the hell it is.
Yep.
All of a sudden, they're like the most popular blade ever.
Yeah.
Look at Edge, look
Yeah.
at Radix.
Yeah.
Like, they start out, nobody knows about them. All of a sudden, it's like, in all fairness, I don't want to sound rude. It doesn't necessarily is like they're the best blades.
Hype.
They just get the hype. Yeah. I mean, they're good blades.
Yeah.
You can't say they're not. They're really good blades, and they kind of deserve to be where they're at. But it's all about the hype. People just say, oh, I like these blades. They fly awesome. And then the next dude buys them, and the next guy buys them and buys them.
Exactly.
And all of a sudden, before you know it, you have a infestation of Edge rotor blades. or whatever. I'm just using
Wow,
that as an example.
infestation. Nice.
But
That's good.
But I think the point of the episode was to prove and show that all blades can be good. Like there isn't really a good or a bad blade. It's all a matter of personal preference, flying style.
Yeah, exactly.
If you like the gel coat color of this blade, don't like the gel coat color of that blade, just fly the blade you like. Because in the end, they're all so similar. They're all good.
Yeah, exactly.
Some of them might track better. Some of them might have more pop. Some of them might load the motor a little bit more. Some of them are a little bit quicker. But the differences are pretty small.
Yeah, exactly.
In fact, most pilots don't even notice the differences, really.
It's hard.
So,
Man. Who knows what we'll bring you next month? It should be exciting.
Yeah. Have a good one, guys.
Cool.
See ya.
See you. Bye.
This is the enter number 2. Enter number 2.
I fucking need coffee. I'm tired.
I don't know where the hell the thing went.
Do you hear it freaking out? It's like,
Yeah.
Why?
Oh, it's your microphone.
Oh,
Yeah, it's your microphone.
wait.
This is episode number 24, enter number 2. Take 1 and action.
So this is the history of it. Take one.
of it before technical. Take 1 action.
Yep. So before we get into technical stuff here, I decided that it was worth giving a little bit of a early history of rotor blades. Since the beginning of time, well,
That thing's badass. It's a freaking electric vintage shuttle. 1
action. Okay, so as we discussed before, most of the blades today come pre-balanced. So what makes a blade balanced? Actually, hold on for a sec. Cut that. We need a scale. Do you have a scale? Yeah, this is tail blades.
Tail blades, take 1 action. Let's talk a little bit about tail blades. Tail blades are actually quite an important part of the helicopter. Without them, you have no tail. I just started thinking about something and I cracked up. Keep rolling.
What did you think about?
I was gonna make a joke and I fucked up and I started getting stupid. All right.
What was the joke?
Action. There's 2 things that you have to keep in mind with tail blades that are very important. No, don't fucking do this, dickhead. I was moving along pretty well.
I can't help it.
I was moving along pretty well.
I can't help it.
All right, cut it. Cut. This is tail blades, take 4, action. We're going to talk about tail blades. We can't, motherfucker. No way, dude. No way. We're never going to get it done. Ticket.
I just farted.
In action.
Okay, guys, we can't really go on and finish this episode without talking about tail blades. What the fuck? Do I have to go out for a cigarette, take a break?
Yeah, I gotta take a shit. Getting wasted, Jaeger bombs, Heineken,
Sit.
Frugal.
Sit. Upright.
These are the weapons of the Pitch Brother drinking team.
Oh, we need a backlight setting. More coffee?
Fuck, I've had enough coffee. I'm about to crash and have a heart attack.
Step
You
forward.
stepped on the shit.
Step forward.
I'm your height now.
No, no.
Oh,
All right, this
something
is
in my
at
shoe.
the field. Take 2. Action.
Action.
All right, we're now at the field. And,
Yay.
we're going to show you now a few tips. Basically, what to look for in a blade.
Yep.
Like Bobby said earlier, there's like, fuck. Take 2. Take 2.
Take 3.
Take 3.
Action.
Take 3. Action.
We're at the field. Yay.
Take fucking 3.
What?
Take 4.
What?
Take 4. Action.
We're at the field. Yay. It's awesome out. It's beautiful. Now we're going to fly. So we've...
Wait. We got a box for you to stand on.
Oh, Bert has a box to stand on. Here, stand on the box.
Stand on the box.
Stand on the box. There you go. You're going to step on the shit. Okay, so we're at the field, people.
This is take 5.
Fuck.
Take 5. Action.
So we're at the field.
These guys are stupid.
Ah! All right, again.
All fiberless systems eventually, at a certain point, rotate at the same speed. Let me start over. Take 2. Action.